Tell Me More podcast is being recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. Welcome to Tell Me More, where we have conversations about the good, the bad and the real. I'm your host, Olivia Molly Rogers. There have been many times in my life when my inner critic has told me not to do the things I want to do. So today I invited the lovely Clare Bowditch to help me talk about that. Clare is an ARIA Award-winning musician, actor, author, entrepreneur, and truly one of the most generous storytellers that I have come across. In this conversation, we talk about the journey to self-acceptance, the messy, brave, deeply human paths. Clare opens up about her relationship with her body, confidence, and her inner critic, who she affectionately calls Frank. Clare is the kind of person who reminds us that it's okay to be a work in progress and that being kind to ourselves is not just possible, but powerful. Clare Bowditch, it is so lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
This has been a little while coming, isn't it?
It has been.
Hasn't it? Yeah.
Well, you're a busy woman and I tried to catch you last year. Didn't quite work, but I'm so grateful that you're here this time.
We were like ships passing. Congratulations on this new stellar season. Well done.
Thank you.
It's a real labour of love doing a podcast.
It is. And I said to my team just before we jumped on and you walked in that I don't think I would be doing this podcast if I hadn't read your book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing to say. Gosh, because I'm glad you're doing one. I'm not. So take all of that energy and please.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. That's a real surprise to me, but thank you so much.
No, thank you.
What do you mean by that?
Your book, Your Own Kind of Girl, my mum bought it for me in 2019, Christmas 2019. And so I read it over the summer of 2020 before everything got messy. And it was I definitely, and I'm not saying this because you're sitting in the chair, it is one of the best, most helpful books that I have ever read. And I read a lot. I love reading.
That's a real compliment. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I think I can just relate to so much of your story, and I actually went back and looked through my messages because I know that I messaged you when I read your book. So start of 2020, and I said...
well, that's when I knew I had a bestseller. I'm like, what? No.
Oh, no,
How do you know about me?
Oh, well.
No, it's lovely of you.
I messaged you and said something along the lines of, I feel like you're just talking to me. And I think all of the content that you put out there, you have a really special way of doing that. You're a very, very good storyteller, which is why we're going to get into some storytelling today, I think. But how would you describe yourself to a complete stranger?
My name is Clare Bowditch. I'm a retired soccer mum. The truth is my identity at the moment is so in flux, I think, and this is true for many women in my stage of life. So we could start with the traditionals, which is, what we do, or, perhaps the fact that I'm a mum of 3. They're grown up. They're 18 and 22 now.
Oh, wow.
Which is extraordinary. And we often sort of describe ourselves in relationship to our family. And I'm a woman who has lost both her parents. I've got 2 sisters and a brother. And it feels like family and reflection and not putting a lot out in the world, but a lot going on inside me as a human being at the moment makes it sort of really hard for me to know how to describe myself anymore. Sometimes when we have those markers like a book or an album, or, our kids are in year 12, or we just got divorced, or whatever it is. I didn't, but I'll just say that. It's clearer to describe who we are. But I reckon at this stage, 49, on the cusp of 50, I'm sitting here going, sheesh, tell me who I am. Because I am coming into it's almost like you're a teenager again at this age.
Coming into a different chapter.
A different chapter and a different sort of, it's funny because there's a lot of levity and humour at this age because your body takes over in some ways. Hormonally you don't quite realise it, but you're changing a lot. Emotionally you start reflecting a lot, and physically you sort of having really honest conversations with friends, often just whilst walking together on the creek. It's just a really interesting little time. But I guess you'd say I'm a musician. Let's just say that. That was a really long answer, guys. I wanted to be straight up, though. This is Tell Me More, and I pretty much have said everything now.
No, I love that. I think that we are all so many things, and it is hard to just identify with one particular, I guess, occupation or description when you wear so many hats, which you do.
Yeah, and I think also at this time of, I'm 20 years, I'm celebrating 20 years since an album called What Was Left, which really was the first very brave, very public thing that I did that started my life out there rather than internally and domestically, being an indie musician with my small crew, with my small family. And then in life sometimes you have these things that bring you into public. And just come back from doing a 20-year anniversary show with a guy called Ian Grandage in Adelaide about that album. We played it from the start to the finish. A lot of fans from the old days came from all over Australia. And I guess you've caught me in a really little emotional pocket where I'm like, sheesh, wow, life, it's wild. And I'm also really aware that I haven't put any book out in the world since that one in 2019. And I don't know which story to tell at the moment.
Well, you have so many, and I'm going to make it a little bit simpler for you to start, I think, because we're going to do a little rapid fire so that the audience can get to know you just with some little quickies.
Hi, audience. Are you there or there? Hi, guys.
They're
nice
everywhere.
to meet you. Good to be with you.
We're going to start with some simple ones. So heels or sneakers?
Definitely heels. Sneakers. Shit. No, excuse me. Neither.
Neither.
But
I'm looking at your shoes and they're not heels or sneakers.
No, they're Docs, but I always wear flats. I have for a really long time.
What is one wardrobe item that every woman should have?
Oh, goodness me, some underpants. I think they're really handy to have.
What's the cut?
So it's up to you, but comfortable. But for the right date night, I think you should, splurge a little.
Spice it up.
Yeah. I won't show you mine, but,
That's a good answer. I've never had that, and makes me think about the fact that I did put on some Bridget Jones style comfy undies today. So there you go.
I recently had the pleasure of helping launch a book for a woman called Gita Chick, who's this extraordinary Australian who won Alone Australia. And she was saying during her adventure, during the launch, that during Alone she had to be really, you have to be careful to wear your undies. And I've always really admired people who can just freeball it in life, but I'm just not that person. I need my underpants.
Well, I am going to make a confession that I have freeballed a few times with particular dresses because I couldn't get away with any kind of line.
Yes.
But yeah, then the risk of the
Does it set you on edge all night? Do you not have a glass of champagne because you're like, oh, I better keep myself or do you does this just become normal in your world and you're like, yeah, whatever?
It depends on the dress, I think.
Yeah.
Like if it's got a high slit, I think I have done high slit, no undies, risky business. So yeah, you got to be careful.
And then you just like wind draft, you've got your people around you, just go, keep the wind away.
Just tell a friend, be on watch.
I love it. It's gutsy and fascinating.
What's your go-to coffee order?
So I usually have a little piccolo, just like this one here. And I started having sugar again during COVID, which I love. Again, it's just one of those wild things that I do, putting sugar in my coffee.
Crazy. What a time to be alive. What is your favourite personality trait of your own?
I don't know, but I like the fact that regardless of how dark things get, there is a sense of absurdity within me, which I think I inherited from my parents, this kind of cosmic tragedy comedy that is life. I think I know that I'm really not okay when I can't find a little absurd twist. So maybe that's one of my most useful traits, and I love that in other people too.
That's really nice. If you could only listen to one song.
Oh, God.
I know, every day for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I tell you what, I don't know what it would be. It would probably be a very long symphony that extended over a few hours. Like I'd choose Vivaldi's Four Seasons or something like that was very long and a bit of a cheat because I love variation. But there was a period of time I was making a work for Audible at a certain period of time after COVID. And the only thing that would motivate me in the morning was, and this is embarrassing to admit, I don't know why it was, my children were worried, I couldn't stop playing the song Boys of Summer just on repeat and Maniac on repeat. So I just went straight back to the 80s. And I reckon I played it on repeat, like I think it was in my top 5 for the end of the year.
That's amazing. Yeah, do you know how many times you played it?
I was clocking thousands. Like It was genuinely, I think I would fall asleep with my draft and it would just sort of, either of those two songs would be repeating. So it's a bit odd.
What about your favourite musical instrument?
Look, I think for portability, I love the voice. Everyone who speaks can, to some degree or not, and even people who can't speak can sing. And people don't believe me when I say that, but I've been proving it in rooms with strangers for about 25 years. That's probably my first love, that love of passing on the love of singing, which I inherited from my parents, that normal, natural use of voice. So the voice is just so handy.
That's really beautiful. I would love for you to tell that to my dad, though, because he was told he should mime when he was in the choir at school.
And we laugh because, the person who's telling that story is allowed to laugh. But it is one of the few sanctioned areas where we're still really allowed to say pretty mean things to people is around our voice. And in the rooms I run these workshops around if you can speak, you can sing. They're called Sing Song Showtime. So people who don't think they can sing come into a room and by the end of the day, in the company of 100 people, we are performing 5 songs in front of their family and friends. So it's a pretty intense day. But someone like your dad, I'd love to have in the room. It's for people who want to sing but have been told, mime, can you stand at the back? You sound like a cat squealing. And again, it's funny and playful if we do it. But when other people do it to us, it can stick.
Definitely. It's definitely
I hope your dad isn't damaged and you tell your dad, give me a call and we'll sort this one out.
Okay, I will. What is your biggest oh my God moment in your career?
There are the people I've worked with, touring with some of my heroes, local musicians and international musicians too. And yeah, I think I'm often asked about my tour with Leonard Cohen and being a guest in his entourage on his plane and spending that month with him. That was wonderful, extraordinary. But I think a real oh my God moment for myself and my friends, my band and my manager too, was 20 years back when What Was Left was nominated for an ARIA Award, which was a strange, unexpected thing. I never had such an ambition. I didn't know that our kind of songs could go anywhere. And I remember my manager, Danny, coming up to me beforehand, and he's like a Kevin Sheedy character. Great mate of mine. We were both just young, sort of in our 20s, making our way, not knowing what we were doing. He came up to me beforehand and he said, listen, I just want you to know something, mate. We're in the 4th quarter. We're not going to win the ARIA because of who we are, but I believe in you. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. Like none of us had any idea that would happen. And then they called our name or my name and my band's name. And I remember that was an oh my God moment because we went, how strange, I was pregnant with twins at the time. My best mate a guy I'd just been touring with, one of my best mates, Bernie Fanning, had just won King. And we looked at each other and went, what the fuck? For him, it was more normal. For us, it was really, really strange. And I remember my uncle, Bruce, calling me and crying and which I'd never heard him do. And he just said, you will always have this. Now, the relevance of awards and other people rewarding us is up for question and, it can mean what we make it mean. But for me, on that day, it meant that my community was telling me to keep going and I needed to hear that at the time. So that was a bit of an oh my God-y.
That's a very special oh my God-y. I love that.
Also, you know what? You get paid more after you win an ARIA in Australia, which is really handy too.
More credibility.
Well, just making your you're living as a musician, particularly as a small family business, which we were, myself, Marty, and our soon to be three kids. And that was really helpful. I don't know if the same still stands. Music industry's gone through a lot of change, like the modelling industry, like the publishing industry, like the film industry. All of the arts are in flux at the moment, but yeah.
That's special.
Do you love that this is a rapid fire and we're pretty much we've pretty much talked so much. I'm sorry about that, guys.
It doesn't have to be rapid.
Great, I love it.
Because we're learning about you. That's the whole point.
I want to ask you questions. I'm trying to be
You're
polite.
more than welcome. Do you have a really embarrassing moment that stands out?
I do, but do you?
I mean, yeah, I'd have to think about it for a moment.
Guys, we're just quietly thinking about our most embarrassing moments in life ever. God, there are for me, there's just so many.
Same. I'm having flashes. Like, there's lots of embarrassing moments and I'm like, what's appropriate to share?
Life in general is pretty humbling and embarrassing.
Yeah.
It has to be, because that's how we learn and grow. We stuff up, we learn from it. You know, it's how we learn to talk. It's how we learn to love. It's how we learn to do anything. But there are some real standouts, like people that you admire so much and you just say the wrong thing or call them the wrong name or happen to drop an entire sippy cup of pineapple juice on their suit just before they go on stage. Or, you know, there are all sorts of things that happen.
Yeah.
I think it's not for the faint-hearted, though, life in general.
Oh,
we're going to step
definitely. Up. Yeah, I think mine probably, the ones that make me cringe the most are, you know, meeting people in the industry who I think I have met before, but it's just because I've seen them on TV. Like, that always makes me cringe. And there are lots of things that happen day to day for me that I'll dwell on later. Can you tell us something that you do every day that just adds a little more to your life?
Okay. So I do try and do something new every day. And I try and bring in either a new smell, a new sound, a new word. And I've done that for a really long time. And that's something that's just a small little act of everyday creativity that no one else has to know about. But for me, it gives me a pop of pleasure.
That's really cool.
What do you do?
I was listening to your latest Audible original, which is Find Your Creative Courage.
Thank you, yes. Yeah.
Did I get the wording right?
No, you did.
Yes.
And I'm amazed because we changed the title many times. But that's what it was.
It's amazing. I really enjoyed listening to that.
Appreciate that.
You talk about smushing, where I was actually telling Dan and Steph just before, so you write and correct me if I'm wrong because I am not the author, you write a list of things that you love. So things that you love to listen to, taste, smell, books, all sorts of things, the things you love. And then you write a list of the things that you have to do every day, and some you might like, some you might not like, you know, waking up, brushing your teeth, making your bed, making your breakfast, all those things.
That phone call, that vacuuming.
Yeah, all the things. And then you smush them. So you might listen to your favourite song while you are cooking, or go for a walk listening to an Audible original, and you smush the things that are more mundane with the things that you love. And I wasn't consciously doing that, but listening to that made me realise how often I do that.
Yeah, intuitively, naturally. Yeah. I loved the idea of smushing because it simplified this, what can be quite an alienating thought for people, like, I'm not creative, or what is creativity, or we think it belongs to artists, or so on. And that little thread of just newness, of two existing elements, smushing them together and creating something new was the simplest explanation I could have for creativity that people could relate to. But we forget about the aim. You know, the aim is not, for me anyway, this everyday creativity, it's not about brilliance or anyone else. It's really about creating a possibility of pleasure in our lives, which are difficult. And yeah, I'm glad thanks for mentioning that. It was just a thing that I think we all do, that it was good to put words to.
Yeah, I think maybe people listening will, when they stop and think about that too, like I think a lot of us do it subconsciously. And also, you know, in the way that you get dressed in the morning, like that could be the way that I know that Steph, who is with us, she is very creative in the way that she dresses. It's like something that you have to do every day. So you might as well make it fun.
Exactly. And you might as well draw in those creative heroes. So sometimes, you know, if I'm not feeling brave and I have to show up, I will pop on that splash of Mae West red lipstick or something that reminds me of someone who is a character who was brave or, you know, embodied the quality that I need in that moment. And it's just really, really handy. So when people say to us, I'm not creative or I'm not creative enough, you are. We all, you know, we don't have to do it as a job to claim our right to creativity and newness and getting to know ourselves. And it can be as private as you like.
Now, with your book and your...
Just getting down to business now.
I am. We're wrapping up the non-rapid fire. Your Own Kind of Girl, Tame Your Inner Critic, Find Your Creative Courage. Mm-hmm. They are all very different. The common theme that I found, or there's a common character who I want to talk about.
I told you that I was coming here to find out who I was. She's going to sort it out for me. Yeah, hit me.
Frank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old Frank.
Can we talk about Frank?
Absolutely.
Who is he?
So Frank is a name that I gave to my inner critic when I was about 21. And I use the term inner critic just really meaning that repetitive, protective, evolutionarily important voice that allows us to stay safe and warns us of danger. But for some of us with particular propensities and life experiences, it can really manifest as a voice of acute anxiety. When I was 21 years old, I was surprised to find that I was in a backpackers in London and I'd been having this rolling argument with myself for a long time about all manner of things, including my body. And it came to a head after quite an intense period of stress and insomnia. And that voice in my head became so loud that I had what 1 in 5 Australians will have, which is an acute episode of mental ill health that really threatened my life. Fortunately, I told myself I just had a virus, but the voice in my head, who I would later call Frank, who I have a far better relationship with now, really, you know, I couldn't see a point for carrying on. And I mention this out loud, although it's a difficult thing, because it's such a common experience and I didn't know that at the time. So when I went to the doctor and said, I think I've got a virus, the doctor checked me out in London and said to me, I think you're actually experiencing depression or anxiety and I think you should go home. It was such a shock for me and I didn't realise how bad the state I was in was until I then saw a friend of mine, Chowdo, Libby, who's still one of my dearest friends, and her and her mum very graciously got me on that plane home. And when I came home, having struggled all of my life, so Frank, you know, it really appeared as the voice of you're not good enough and so on, and was with me through all of my piano accordion body days. I was a big kid who grew up with the message that we should be small, and I adhered to that message at various times and got really confused about what my sense of self was. So I didn't realise I was as unwell as I was until I really got home, walked out of the airport gates and my mum was standing there with, as always, with her bunch of flowers, and she just grabbed me on both sides of my arm and gave me a hug and she said, "Where have you gone?" And I realised I'd lost half my body weight without knowing it. And so that for me was then a long and kind of shocking period of time and a recovery that, thank goodness, I had other friends, my mum's friends who I could talk to about that. I actually didn't talk, but they talked to me. And one friend of my mum's, Kath, gave me a book, a little simple book called Self-Help for Your Nerves by Dr. Clare Bowditch, who is one of those stalwart legends of Australian medical history whose name is sometimes forgotten and I love bringing up because this little book was just a simple formula for treating what they called at the time bad nerves. We might call it PTSD now or OCD or any of the acronyms really. That was really helpful. And another book that I had was called A Path with Heart by Jack Cornfield, and it suggested this exercise. This is how we get to Frank. It suggested an exercise called Naming the Emotions. And my recovery, sort of long story short, my recovery was long, but these couple of points really helped me. And one of them was remembering that playful sense of self that I spoke about before, the absurdity. So I sit down, I've been brought up Catholic, but in this period in time, I'm definitely going to be a Buddhist, and I'm trying really hard to do this exercise called Naming the Emotions, but I was so ragged in my mind and had so much fear and anxiety that I couldn't even name what I was feeling. It was just a cluster of awful and just that rolling panic attack. And I remember at a certain point just thinking, what if I just gave it an umbrella term? Like, what if I just called it a name? Like, what if I just called all of these feelings a name? And I chose the name Frank because at the time I didn't have anyone in my immediate life called Frank, and it was F for fear, and it just made sense to me. And this I now realise in retrospect and have been told by people in the know who are experts in mental ill health that this is quite a common CBT technique, externalising the inner critic. But it meant that each time that feeling came upon me, instead of it being like this dreadful internal meanness, I could say, g'day, Frank, there you are again, and have a little play with that feeling in just that, half a second of distance, and allow me to then form a better relationship internally with how to talk to ourselves, how to encourage ourselves, and how to clock the fact that, if we're having feelings of fear, we can't really stop that first thread of anxiety if we're there, if we're in that space, but we do have a choice in that second thought. Am I under threat? What am I actually feeling? What do I need? Or, and this is where professional therapists come in.
Oh, definitely.
And learning that stuff. But my recovery was really thanks to being able to start externalising Frank.
Yeah, I think because if you think it's your brain solely that is the inner critic, then you start to criticize yourself even more because you're like, why am I thinking like that? And it's just this perpetuating cycle. Inspired by you, I named my inner critic Spike.
I love that.
Spike is very spiky, so it's fitting.
How's your relationship with Spike at the moment?
Pretty good at the moment, yeah. There's been some rocky times. And I feel like, I don't know if you experienced this, maybe not because Frank has been one being for so long, but I sometimes feel like there's lots of little spikes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Nowadays we sort of have far more knowledge of the various schools of thought that talk about these internal parts of ourselves, and that parts work, that internal family systems and so on, is a really interesting therapeutic modality that a lot of people say to me, have you ever done IFS work? And I think allowing ourselves to have a relationship with whatever it is inside us, these feelings, and giving them names, and a variety of names, is also really, really handy. You might call it the inner critic, you might call it the protector, and the way we think about these various impulses or thoughts or things that we're dealing with is really, really interesting. One of the beautiful things that I finally got as life went on was that the voice of Frank was a very overprotective, impulse that is really important for survival, but that when I was afraid of Frank, it would make, when I was afraid of my anxiety or that feeling of fear, it would just sort of grow and grow. But if you can then, as time goes on, the real aim, you know, sometimes you have to say, Frank, get in the corner because I've got a job to do. I've got to give birth, or I've got to get to that place on time, or so on. So starting in a relationship and a conversation is, helpful and useful. But really what we want is to be friends with ourselves. We want a gentle, kind approach to those impulses. We want someone to say to us, as you would as a kid, it's okay. You're afraid because you're excited. Or, it's normal and natural to be afraid. And I love referencing things like the Harvard, business study, it's a 2014 study, reappraisal of pre-performance anxiety. It's called Get Excited. That's the name of the study. But it reminds us that these neural pathways with anxiety and excitement are quite finely entwined, and there are these small techniques that we can play with, like when I get on a plane and I have that first fear thought, if I try and tell myself, shut up, be quiet, blah, 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 it doesn't help me. But if I say to myself, I'm a little bit overexcited, my brain is more likely to believe it. So it's nice. It's really great in these days that we've got people like you talking about things like this. We've got old hats, we've got all these different sort of people having a discussion about what is really a very human experience. And I don't feel any shame anymore about that. And I did for so long. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And thank you for saying that. I do think that from what I learned in your book, the feelings that you had were so similar to feelings that I've had. And then when I talk about it and I get messages from people, and I'm sure you've had the same, people being like, oh, wow, I feel so sane. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that other people experience what I was experiencing. So it is so important to have these conversations to shine a light on it and stop people feeling ashamed, because it feels like such a lonely, isolating experience, but it is one that is so common. I'm wondering if you can share some of the thoughts that Frank sort of, or your inner critic, has told you, particularly when it's been very loud.
Oh, yeah. Look, it's sort of, it's like, geez, where to start? The thing about our inner critics are or that internal voice of, that survival instinct, because it is via that instinct of wanting to be part of a social group or belong or useful or know your place or be protected. That is all part, again, of our evolutionary inheritance. It is why we as a particular species find ourselves in this room, thanks to my ancestors being finely tuned and understanding danger and knowing how to run from it. And, there are so many millions of stories back there that any one human being's ancestors have gone through to get us here. So I understand that at all times. That's really clear. In the modern world, there are no real tigers, physical tigers to run from. But there are things like social media, and there are things like schoolyards. And the general story that I had, and I can see that clearly now, at the time when I was a kid, I didn't know how clear and bright and obvious these stories were. But because you want to fit in, you don't want to be, or I didn't want to be, the fat kid at school. And I was the fat kid at school. And there was no part of me at that age, at 5, 6 and 7, that could say to myself, guess what? You're strong and robust and you've been through a lot, kid. And the fact that you like to eat food and it makes you feel safe and comfortable is okay. And there's nothing wrong with you. And the fact that you have to shop at the older woman's section of Myer is not your fault. That is a crime of fashion that will be resolved in times to come. But I had no context for that. So I remember this feeling of being called fat and my mum trying so hard to give me another narrative. But I wanted my peers to understand that I was worth hanging out with too. And this internal criticism of thinking there's something wrong with me because I was bigger and taller really set in. And, you know, that's what sets us up for the diet culture that sort of sits there presenting the solution. And when I was 11, I think it was 10 or 11, I got the solution via a doctor. And I came back from school holidays a thin, very different looking kid, so much so that I wasn't recognised by my librarian, and I suddenly had this pop of being popular. And it was, you know, so that's one of the stories that really set in early in.
Yeah.
Is that you must stay thin, but in order to stay thin, you must not eat. And then if you don't eat, you can't think properly. And continue not realising I was giving all of the options to the world to tell me who I was. And it really took me a long time to accept I just have the kind of body that, you know, it loves food. My weight will wax and wane throughout my life, and it's okay, and it's very, very normal. And so that was a relief to sort of stop having to spend so much time on that series of questions. But that was really early on one of the thoughts that I had just before I had my nervous breakdown, which is what we called my acute episode of mental health. The thought was, you know, either I have to get really thin or there's no point me being alive. And I heard myself have that thought, and it terrified me, and I knew we were in trouble then.
Oh, I can like feel that in my gut because I can relate to that so much, of just letting your worth be, your worth is in control of other people. Like other people have control over your worth, and it is solely connected to your body size and how you look.
And the thing is, we're not idiots, because the truth is the world does treat us very differently depending on how we look. So we were these sort of kids who were responding actually quite correctly to cues.
Yeah.
But there was no way of separating what was internal and external.
Yeah.
And even just giving myself permission now to sort of look my best or enjoy my body, again, that was something that took a really long time, because we live in this polarity, in this duality. We are physical beings, and there are all of these joys and pleasures available, and colour and, you know, and creativity and enjoying our bodies. But that gets seconded by industries that want to simply sell us stuff with no values attached except that of making money for them. And to get clear on that and be able to both enjoy yourself but not believe those stories that's, for some of us, that's part of our life's work.
Definitely. What I said at the beginning of, I don't think I would have started this podcast had I not read your book, and I truly mean that. My inner critic was so loud, and still can be. Like I did say, Spike and I, we're okay, but every now and then, well, no, he talks to me every day. Sometimes more critical and louder, and sometimes it's like, I can shrug it off a bit more easily. But it's things like, who cares? No one's going to care what you put out there. Don't bother. There's so much of that anyway. Who do you think you are?
And isn't it interesting how it changes? Yeah. Because our inner critic / protective mechanisms are so clever and so keen for us to survive, that they're really smart. So whatever it is that you take on a new challenge, starting a second season of a podcast in an era where there are podcasts, to have the maturity and the sense of mind to understand that I don't know who this will affect, but I've got the urge to do it and I'm going to give it a crack. And, your Spike or your Frank, they want to keep us safe and small, and their stories change. I've got a story at the moment. I haven't put out music for a while. Now all the stories start about relevance as a woman of my age. Do I have anything left to contribute? Was that book the only thing I needed to do with my life, and now my work is finished? To have the gumption and the actual guts to have a conversation with yourself where you're humble enough to say, I don't have the answer. You could be right, Frank or Spike. I have the urge to give it a crack anyway, so I'm gonna.
Well, I think in this industry or any industry where you are consistently choosing to put yourself out there when you know that you will be criticised, and if you look for, the confirmation bias of it's shit and no one likes it, I'm sure I could find it.
Oh, God, I could find that 3 seconds for myself. Find it inside my own head, let alone out there,
But yeah, the problem is when it is in your head and then you can actually see it or you hear it from an external critic, then it validates it, and that can be so challenging. What would you tell someone who's listening who is experiencing that really loud inner critic and it's stopping them from, it doesn't have to be a huge thing like writing a book or releasing a podcast, or
sometimes it's actually just speaking your mind in a meeting or saying something that's true or having the guts to put on the red lipstick.
Or, maybe quit a job and try something that you actually want to pursue, or it can be a number of different things. What's your advice to someone other than naming the inner critic? How can you push past that?
My advice is taken from all of the variety of things that have worked for me, which is other people's advice, which is just this human impulse to understand that it's possible we're here for a reason. The whole point of naming Frank, having any relationship with ourselves, is in the hope that we can have a better relationship with ourselves. And what I like to do sometimes is just call in those reminders of courage. So I not only have Frank, I also have the voice of my inner champion. This can come through a song, a colour, a saying, a memory, a kind word to myself. I have a long list of things that I actually have to be very proactive about reminding myself that it's okay that I exist, and that it's okay that I try, and it's okay that I have no control over what other people think of me. And I do that by remembering other people, places, smells, senses, tastes, moments from the world, from history, from anywhere, that remind me of courage, of the possibility that it's okay to give it a crack. So when I meet you and we have this conversation, that's a really strong personal reminder to me that it's okay that we tell the truth about the difficult things, and it's okay that we don't have all the answers. But it's important for me to be reminded that there's power in giving it. Giving voice or giving some attention to the possibility that there's joy and pleasure and power around. So look, I invite and encourage people. I've got a lot of acronyms. So we work within our propensities, Some people have strengths here. One of mine is I love words. I find them galvanizing. I love an acronym because it simplifies something for me. And the one I've been working with lately, and you're welcome to take it and reinvent it to suit you, is CARE, which is really about clocking that thought, accepting it, reminding myself or reframing, that thought in some other way. For example, I'm scared to I'm excited, or I have to do it perfectly, to I don't have to do anything perfectly. I'm allowed to give it a crack. And then egging ourselves on, encouraging ourselves. So little things like that, little tricks are really helpful. And I can't sort of express how deeply I hope that anyone who's experiencing that internal sense of pointlessness or challenge, especially in these times, these are really difficult times, you can just have a sweet little thought that can turn things around, or a nice little encouragement, or a good memory, and just start there.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. One thing that my psych shared with me that I think could be helpful too is when I'm having difficult, mean thoughts, that I clock it, like you say, and then assess it and think, is it true and is it helpful?
Great.
So
good.
I don't know, I have a big pimple on my chin or something. That might be true, but it's not really helpful to think about that. Like, that's a very shallow example, but
yeah, it's a nice simplifying.
It helps you to, analyze it and then let it go.
I didn't want to release a book in the world about the most difficult things that I'd gone through in my life. I accuse myself of that being just another cliche, another thing to add. Who needs to hear it? Why put your children under, why admit to all of this stuff? But I got to say, in telling the truth, these are the only things that matter. Like to me in the end, about having a public job.
Yeah.
So.
No, I'm so glad that you did write that book.
Thanks, buddy.
It's literally the reason we are here right now. So I'm very grateful. I don't want to stop talking to you, but we're going to run out of time.
I know you've got other guests, I know. Had a great time. I want to admit I was late. This is one of the things that stops me sometimes from showing up. I often run a little behind. Admitting that and saying sorry is just like I get to keep showing up, but I am sorry. It's my fault we're running behind.
Oh, no, it's so fine. It gave us more time to think of little additional questions for you.
I've got a lot of questions for you too, so I don't know. Maybe you'll inspire me to start my own podcast where I can just ask you questions myself.
We do wrap up our episodes with a little segment called Oranges and Lemons.
Yes.
And we've added a seedling in. So your orange is something positive from today or the last few days that you can share. Lemon, something a little bit more sour or negative. And then the seedling is what you're looking forward to. Two
on theme, I know, but I planted a garden with my husband 20 years ago, and we're now at this stage where I'm actually going to incorporate all three into this one little story.
That's really clever.
So you never have any idea when you plant that little seedling if you'll be around when it grows or not, or whether it will take or whether it will work. But we planted this garden. We planted a lime tree. We inherited an olive tree, and I planted a Meyer lemon tree. The Meyer lemon tree didn't work. It's still sitting there just like this after 20 years going, I'm not quite ready, which is fine. The lime tree is fecund and full of the most extraordinary limes. But the olive tree, to sit, this is what I look forward to. It's a really small domestic example. But the other day I come home and my daughter, who lives down the road with her mates, she's an artist, and she'd come home from a trip overseas and she was with us for a few weeks just in between, houses. And I come home and her and all of her mates, these 22-year-old, like the coolest kids, you can, you look at them and like, I would like to have been friends with you when we were that age. They are great kids because they're thinkers and they're fun and they're honest and they are themselves and they give me great courage. But they're all sitting there sort of shaking the olive tree and collecting the olives and putting them in a vat, and they'll spend the next 2 weeks having to rinse them every day, and whether they'll do it or not is, they probably will, but it really gave me something to look forward to. We've got these olives coming, we've got this new generation coming. They're inspiring us, the old folks. I went out after they'd left and I gave that tree a shake. I've got my own little jar now. They reminded me that the effort is worth it. We don't know what the outcome is.
I love that. You're so good. You are so good with words. You do say that that's your thing, and I definitely agree with that.
I don't know that I'm good with them, but I really like them. Yeah. And I think that's often a clue. If you like something and you're sort of really curious about it, then it might be for you.
I mean, I do have just generally an ongoing lemon that is my cousin has brain cancer, and yeah, it's going to be an ongoing lemon for a while. She's going through treatment. My orange is that I'm not sure when we're releasing this episode, but it's probably going to be after it happens. But I've been organising a fundraiser for brain cancer research, and we have well and truly gone over the target of ticket sales, and I'm so stoked about that. Thank you.
Well done.
My inner critic was like, don't organise a big fundraiser, keep it small, because what if no one comes? a lot of thoughts around that. But then it is something that is so much bigger than me. And I think that's the real reason people are showing up. But the generosity and kindness that people have shown has been such an orange, because I think it is times like this when you really see the goodness in people, and that's been a really big orange. And the seedling is that I'm looking forward to seeing how the night unfolds. And yeah, my target is to raise over $50,000, and I'm feeling quietly confident that we can do that. So yeah, that's my seedling.
Well done, my friend.
Thank you so much. It has been such a joy to have you in the chair. So thank you for joining me. And
thank you.
I think we might have to get you back at some stage.
I'll be here, babe. Just down the road.
Thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Tell Me More. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review, share it with your friends, and follow or subscribe to the podcast. Your help in growing this community would mean so much to me.